Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures, the podcast about watching movies and inflicting them upon each other. My name is Ben and with me is...
I'm going to be Chuck.
You're definitely Gally, and this week Jim inflicted the movie The Maze Runner.
Look, Gally's eyebrows are some of the most expressive on the planet. And I don't
Poulter,
think...
man, the guy can act.
I know, like he actually can. He's
I know,
really
right?
good. Like, you know, but seriously, those eyebrows are expressive, and I don't know if I've got it, you know, but man, I love that guy. But like, look, so this was my pick, The Maze Runner. So let me do a quick synopsis of events before we can dive into the glorious film that was. So The Maze Runner follows Thomas, who emerges from underground via an elevator in a mysterious glade with no memory. He joins a group of boys led by Albie and Newt, who have built a rough society while trying to solve a massive maze that surrounds them. Runners like Minho map the shifting maze daily, avoiding deadly biomechanical creatures called grievers that roam at night. When Thomas breaks the rules to save lives, tensions rise, especially from Gally, a strict enforcer of order who sees Thomas as a threat. Thomas also forms a bond with the youngest glader, a 12-year-old boy named Chuck. The arrival of Teresa, the first ever girl, throws the glade into chaos. Her arrival coincides with the grievers starting to attack the glade directly, and this causes Thomas to lead a risky plan to escape. The group fights their way through the maze, losing several members along the way, including Albie, and at the exit, Gally appears and fatally wounds Chuck before Thomas then kills him. A handful of survivors escape, only to learn that the maze was actually a test by the Wicked Corporation, and the world outside has been devastated by disaster. They're seemingly rescued by a group of militant freedom fighters, but it's hinted that it may not be the freedom that they'd hoped for. The end.
All those things happen in this movie, yet very few of them are what I'm going to speak about, because I've seen this movie a few times. I've seen all three, actually. And there's something about these movies that has always really annoyed me, and we'll get to it. But first of all, just some quick factual information about this movie. Maze Runner, released 2014, directed by Wes Ball, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and all the other Maze Runner movies. Written by Noah Oppenheim, Pierce Myers, and T.S. Nellin. Starring Dylan O'Brien, A.S. Solari, Thomas Brody Sangster, Will Poulter, and Patricia Clarkson. There are many, many children and young actors in this movie. I'm not going to list them all. Runtime of 113 minutes, budget of $34 million, and a box office of a whopping $348.3 million. What drew you to us watching this YA adaptation?
Look, there was a huge host of YA adaptations, you know. You could argue that it began with Twilight, you know. You could argue that maybe it wasn't Twilight. Twilight was very, very specific, you know. It had the romance angle. It was the vampires. Maybe we're really chasing that Hunger Games money, you know, is
Definitely
perhaps
chasing Hunger Games money.
Is perhaps the bigger one. But basically, after Hunger Games hit, YA became an arms race within Hollywood to get the next... It was a gold rush to try and get the next sci-fi property that was going to make bajillions of dollars. Of that, we got The Giver, we got Divergent, we got Maze Runner.
I Am Number 7 or whatever it is.
We got I Am Number 4, you know? So look, my favorite of all of them is the Maze Runner series. So, and this is going to sound crazy, but what led me to Maze Runner was actually our discussions about the strength and the outdoorsiness of director Akira Kurosawa, all right? Because we just talked about Seven Samurai, and I was actually then led to going, actually, you know, Wes Ball, in his directorial debut, at least his feature directorial debut, I have seen his short VFX film called Ruin, which actually got him this job, but he actually was doing a lot of similar things, you know, to Kurosawa. Now, you're going to say blasphemy, right?
Not blasphemy, just not as well.
But like this is a really confident directorial debut. It's very kinetic. There's a lot of energy to it. And I really enjoy the way this movie is put together. It is not perfect. Absolutely. You know, and the source material has a lot to do with that. But I think there's heaps here to talk about, and there's heaps here to like as well, particularly from a technical standpoint. So that was why I picked it. It was the Kurosawa vibes when we're talking indoor outdoor sets and commitment to practicality and, you know, moving the camera. I was like, man, where's Bald? You know, like he's I'm not going to say he's a modern day Kurosawa. I don't want to get firebombed, but like I
think
just
he'd want you to do that.
but I am just gonna say, like, in my brain, I went like it's a highly commercial version of it, but there's some little bit of shared DNA there.
It's a super solid film, and the first film in the series especially deals with its mystery really, really well. It is something that you are 100% correct. I have looked up the source material, not read it. After watching this first film, I've seen the remaining two films. It struggles with knowing where it's going, and it struggles with knowing what the thing is supposed to be. It abandons the source material, I think, in the second and third movie pretty hard, except for a few little basic things.
I read the books, right? So, and no offense to the books, I'm glad they abandoned the source material. They kind of had to. Like, the source material was really built on a series of small reveals that then sort of lead to the next mystery box, which never actually gets paid off throughout the original trilogy. The author, original James Dashner, did go back and kind of fill in the gaps with prequel novels and stuff, but in the actual core original trilogy, you don't get all the answers that you kind of need, you know, to finish out the series. So I'm glad they deviated. But again, this first, I guess, adaptation is the closest to the original novel because it's perhaps the strongest of the three in terms of a story.
And it is, as I said, it deals with its central mystery really well. The whole, hey, none of these kids know why they're here. They're all in this mysterious place. There's this mysterious, dangerous maze, and they don't have purpose, at least to begin with, other than survival. That is changed with the introduction of Thomas, and then later on, what's her name?
Teresa.
Teresa, and they are the propellant that pushes this story to its final act, and it's really good. I just want to really bring up a movie like this, no matter when you make it, is super risky just based on who your cast has to be. Your cast has to be a bunch of teens to children below the age of 18, and I know Hollywood fudges that. They cast older for younger and things like that, but there's still a lot of young people in this movie that have a lot of heavy lifting to do and do such kind of a great job. You're engaged with the kids the whole time. You hate the kids you're meant to hate. You like the kids you're meant to like. You're distrustful of the kids you're meant to distrust. Their acting is really solid, and I think that actually speaks to the director. The director must have really had a tight ship and an organized ship that allowed these kids to do what they did.
And not just that, when I say it's a confident directorial debut, $34 million they did this for, you know? So this was a shoot that was over and out in like less than 2 months. So they were moving really fast and getting these quality performances from these young performers. Now, granted, a lot of them were quite experienced. Dylan O'Brien, you know, Thomas Brody Sangster, and Will Poulter.
Will Poulter,
very experienced prior to actually taking on this film, but still, like, we're able to get these really charismatic performances when there's not a huge amount on the page. It's largely about the mystery and they don't really know who they are. So we get these great charismatic performances and they're delivering. In Thomas Brody Sangster's case, he's got scene after scene of very thinly veiled exposition. Yeah. And he just does it. He just eats it, you know. He just goes through like a far more seasoned actor would and just sells it and just makes it work. And he does it with character and he does it with sort of a sigh in his voice that gives you this world weary sense. So yeah, very impressed with the cast and then therefore very impressed with Wes Ball. And when we think about Wes Ball as well, the way he's moving the camera, the way he is delivering this huge cinematic feel for $34 million is kind of a magic trick. And I know it speaks to his background in VFX because he was a VFX artist before moving into directing, but then that also shows that he handles these visual effects with an insane amount of grace and realism. Like, for $34 million, this film looks way better than it had any right.
And you say like his visual effects background kind of, built him and gave him a chance. There are definitely plenty of people who have come from that background who made their movies. And we look at them today and go, wow, like maybe they shouldn't have made a movie. Because yes, there is a skill set that is useful. Yes, especially if you're going to make heavy effects-driven films, knowing how that is done is really important, especially if you're trying to make the movie as economically as possible. Because, to make an effects-driven movie as economic as possible, you have to have most of your effects and most of your shots really well planned. You can't just shoot and then say, we're going to add this, 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 and this. Doesn't work. That's where money goes down a drain. So I think that's definitely where you're talking about that experience helped him make such a tight ship of a movie. The Maze itself is perfect AA and post-apocalyptic. It's a perfect hook. And you can tell obviously that the story starts with this guy thinking of the maze idea, right? It's such an ominous thing that it's its own character. It's its own thing that reveals, it grows, it changes. I thought this movie, The Maze, is done so well. And just like a lot of YA novels and movies, that's only the first book and then you get rid of the maze. So they're the things I've been thinking about since this is Maze Runner. Every movie's called Maze Runner. First movie's the only one with the maze.
It's tricky. It does that thing where the sins of this movie don't actually have much to do with this movie. It's the fact that the payoff for this movie in the latest sequels is not quite as strong as you want it to be. And there's not a lot they can do about that. And it does retroactively then affect your feelings on this movie, because
I think
you know where it's going, and where it's going isn't as interesting or mysterious or strange as you kind of want it to be, because that's kind of the problem with mystery box storytelling, is it rarely then lives up to the mystery box that is built. So, and it's interesting that we talk about mystery box storytelling, because one thing that I think Wes Ball does really well here is he takes a lesson from the school of J.J. Abrams, which is, in my opinion, when J.J. Abrams has a story that is not as strong as he would like it to be, he covers it with pace. He just ups the pace, and he just makes it breakneck, and he just gets us moving so that we're not thinking about the fact that our plot is a little bit weak. And Wes Ball, I feel like he's using the exact same technique here. When things start to get a little bit shaky from a lore perspective, that's Lore, by the way. But when they start to get a little bit shaky from a lore perspective, or when things about the world don't seem to quite maybe hold together perfectly, he's like, I'm going to cover it with pace. I'm going to cover it with pace. I'm going to get us to the next beat. I'm going to get us to the next character moment. And we're just going to keep things moving. We're going to keep it dynamic. And you'd say that's a cheat. And I guess it kind of is, but it's the right move. It's the right move for this material. So it's something that I really respect, because I go, this is what you had to do to get us out of some of those story situations, and caps off for doing it. And caps off for doing it in your directorial debut. I'm just going to keep coming back to that, because this is
such a great example of that pace thing. Is right in the first third of the movie, Thomas has come up, he's stopped freaking out, and he's kind of starting to integrate, and he's working with the farmers and all that sort of stuff. And he goes off into the woods, and at this moment, you could instantly become bogged down into the minutiae of their society. But you have this moment where he's complaining about having a job, and he gets attacked by Ben, who has been stung. And that leads us to our next bit of motivation. It creates our gap for a maze runner. It creates, it shows him the dark side of his society that he is now in, and he has no choice. And you have this moment. But yeah, that could have, in kind of less sure hands, that could have gone longer, and that would have been a massive mistake, and you would have switched off a lot of people. But you're right, you did this sleight of hand. It's a magic trick. It's like, look over here, stop looking at this. Look, that's exciting, isn't it? And it's very deftly done. And I hadn't thought about it until you brought up what you said. I'm like, oh my God, that's a perfect example of what he does. Like, moving this way, nope, look over here. We're going to keep moving.
He does it time and time again, and he keeps it kinetic, he keeps it moving. And look, I should say, no, it's not just Wes Ball, but it's definitely a huge part of Wes Ball. I believe that it becomes clear when you look at who has writing credits on the sequels. They really solidified that T.S. Nowlin was their writer here. He was the guy. He was the guy that obviously Wes Ball gelled the most with and who sort of brought it home to get this all happening. And the idea that they know that they are first and foremost not just a YA adaptation, but they are leaning heavily into the action genre. This is an action sci-fi film, and anything that they could do to solidify that, to make that clear, really comes across. The idea that we're getting to know a bit more about Gally. How are we going to do it? Well, we're going to put them into a wrestling ring where they're trying to push each other out of the sand, and we're also going to reveal character in that way. This is keep it moving, keep it action, keep it punchy. And again, that suits this particular source material. It also speaks to how well cast Dylan O'Brien is in that lead role, because that suits his charismatic leading man sensibilities. And I'm actually a little bit surprised, to be honest, that after this trilogy of films, we didn't see him really kind of explode as an action star. Now, I know he was relatively young at this point in time, but still, his charisma, his ability to deliver that leading man kind of presence really is something that I'm surprised didn't just, take off and really go, because he's great in this movie.
He got really big on like CW type television with like Vampire Diaries and
Teen Wolf was
Teen
his
Wolf.
show. So he started that prior to the Maze Runner series
Yeah.
and was sort of doing it throughout. So, and look, he has done other work. It's just, again, like I say, I'm surprised he didn't actually explode a little bit more in that leading man kind of space. Can we talk about Teresa as a character? Because
I find this so hard because I know where it goes.
Yeah.
So in this movie and this movie alone, I'm going to try and put the blinkers on. She is script-wise purely a mechanical device, and which is not her fault. It is not necessarily even the director's fault. The story as written needs it. It needs a push. It needs a crisis, and she is that crisis. But because she is a crisis and because she is a mechanical feature of the script, her character suffers in a way that even if she is played to like her, it is kind of hard to like her because that's not her design, even if she's presented that way. And the actress, what's her name?
Kea Scodelario.
I feel sorry for her because I reckon this is probably sold to her as a big thing and like a Katniss Everdeen role for her, and it really kind of isn't. And it creates the interest it needs to, but as far as again, I find it hard to separate from what happens in the next two movies.
Yeah, I struggle with the Teresa character, and the next two films aside, just in this film, I struggle with that character. It's an incredibly challenging character because Teresa shows up halfway through the film. We know who everybody else is. She shows up literally at a point where things are really developing. The plot is moving forward. There is certainly no time now to stop and work out who she is. Doesn't help that everyone enters this world as an amnesiac either. So that then further complicates things. So my theory with Teresa is that this needed to be an actress who had instant, insane chemistry with Dylan O'Brien.
Yeah.
That was really the only thing that could have potentially made that character more interesting. And that is an intangible thing, which doesn't really have anything to do with performance or, because there wasn't time for that. There wasn't time for the scenes with the two of them together. Now, look, yes, they have a couple, but again, it's mostly talking about plot. It's mostly talking about getting going. So therefore, without instant chemistry, which some performers have and other performers don't have with one another, there just isn't too much that is interesting to deal with Teresa. And particularly in the second film as well. And I know we're struggling not to talk about the rest of this series, but they do struggle to develop her further. She does get some development in the third movie, but it's a tricky character. It's a tricky character to get on board with. It's a tricky character to like, particularly when we spend a lot of time with the guys getting so invested in their characters and what's going to happen to them and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's a tricky character. It doesn't work particularly well in this film, but it is a character, as you say, that has a job to do. That job is plot. So we that job is MacGuffin, if you like, for want of a better word, something that we need to get to the next plot point and keep the story moving.
Since we've been watching a movie a week for over a year now, I've developed interests in little different parts of films to help me kind of play a game, like keep me interested or look for different things. And one of those things is Tom Cruise's fault, and that's running. And if you haven't guessed by the name of this title, there's a lot of running in this movie. Like, it's part of the whole plot. And I'm going to say there is some top tier running in this film by Miho's actor Ki Hong Lee and Dylan O'Brien. They are the Tom Cruise award for running in film should be given to those two guys. There are some other kids in this film who can't run, and that's why they're not runners. But they should have given them something, because some of them look damn goofy. Like my boy Chuck. My boy, he gets done dirty by his running and his ending.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Great character, though. I like the Chuck character. And
Chuck is one of the most necessary side characters I've ever seen. As far as, like, he doesn't contribute a lot to the plot of the film. The plot of the film actually goes really well without him. You can replace that character with any other of the characters in there for its ending. But just his kind of like, his youngness in the group, his quiet kind of sitting to the side and just like, I'm not the new guy anymore, and kind of all that kind of those little things. It's really kind of a nice piece of the film.
It's also a very charismatic performance from a very young actor as well. So you instantly like Chuck. And without him saying too much, you like Chuck. It just happens. It's innate that when the character begins to appear on the screen and start talking, you like that character. That's a character who you want to be your little brother because you want to look after him and, have him give you a hard time. Like, it's a character that does its job of building a connection with the audience, because of course the main purpose of that character is then to actually develop our lead character a little bit further at the end of the films. And yes, it's tragic, and yes, it's a sad moment at the end of the movie, but it also is something that really does its job very, very well in terms of, so, shout out to, I want to say that performer, but I don't know. I think
Blake
this was
Cooper.
There you go, Blake Cooper. I think this was his first movie, so well done, Mr. Cooper. But look, this film as well has a lot of stuff in it where you can't think too hard about it, right? And that again comes back largely to the source material. And like I said, when you watch the film once, you don't necessarily notice all of that stuff because Wes Ball covers it with pace. But things like, there's a whole forest in this glade. They could have just built scaffolding to the top of the wall and that would have been fine. They also say at multiple points in the movie, well, the ivy doesn't run all the way to the top. It does. You have several shots where you can actually see it running all the way to the top of the walls.
And they're like, glade. What would you do when you get up there? And you're like, walk out.
Yeah.
You would walk out. That's what you would do.
And also it makes for fantastic movie making, but simply the scale of the maze is another, and it's classic YA, right? It's classic young adult novel fiction whereby it's implausible to have this kind of super mega construction. And then when you find out why they're doing it later in the series, you go, well, there's a better way to do that.
I like to think in this universe, there's this guy in the corner, someone's going to go, guys, we can do this a lot cheaper. We can definitely find this cure in a lot easier way, guys. We don't need to build a maze. And that guy got ignored.
Yeah.
So hard.
But all that aside, it's a cool aesthetic. It's a cool world. It is fast paced. It's a lot of fun. It's very confident from a directorial standpoint. I think that for me, this series and the Hunger Games, it's a toss up for me as to which one I like more. Hunger Games has I guess the pathos, if you like, that Maze Runner doesn't have, because Maze Runner leans into its action adventure sensibilities. But then, hey, who am I if not an action adventure
You're that guy.
junkie? So it's no surprise as to why I'm like, yeah, I'll take pathos. I'll take some stuff from Hunger Games. But at the end of the day, I'm going to really enjoy a nicely put together action film.
It has all the same flaws as any YA movie. It's as simple as that. And if you're okay with that and you want to just have fun, it's a fun movie. I think Hunger Games probably has the tip for me as a series, just because it holds together a bit better, in my opinion. Oh, no.
It also means more. There's politics there. There's different characters.
There's a bit more
different
depth.
Yes, that's right.
But the first Hunger Games movie, the first Maze Runner movie, I think I liked the most out of all the Hunger Games and Maze Runner movies. I think it is just, solitarily speaking, a fun, solid movie. And that is very much down to ball and like very well done. I will watch it again. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And like I said, on the filmmaking side of things, there's also a lot to like here. There's I think he does a really good job of not falling into some traps that first-time filmmakers often fall into. For instance, the night scenes look fantastic in this movie. They're not they're not underlit or underexposed. They're not leaning on a huge amount of very, very obvious Hollywood moon kind of tricks. And ultimately, they just look organic and real and like they're working for us, which again is not something that a lot of filmmakers can do. Night scenes in this kind of dystopian environment can be really, really hard when you look at where are the light sources, what's happening, how are we actually filming it, what camera technology are we using. Like, even like you look at something like Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones, with all of its money, couldn't get these night scenes right outside. Now, look, you ask the creators, they say they got it right and it was all intentional. No one liked it, guys. No one liked it. Okay, so I'm going to say you didn't get it right.
Nah, man, those campfires and those torches, they do light space like that for sure. Anyway, you're right. Like, even in the maze, the way that kind of the light bounces and plays, it doesn't feel too artificial. It feels within the universe. And that's all you can really ask for lighting. Like, sometimes lighting is at its best when you don't notice it. And sometimes it's at its brilliant when you do notice it. It's one of those weird things. Like, it's much harder to lose at lighting than it is to win. And I think they definitely win.
Yeah. And again, speed of production, I'm just impressed. I love this thing. So thank you for coming on the journey with me for the Maze Runner. I will at some point make you watch at least the third one, because the third one has some of the best visual effects I've ever seen in my life to this date. So I'm not even joking.
You know how I feel about out of sequence films.
I know. So like, maybe we'll just have to, watch the Scorch Trials as well. We'll just have to do all three, and get through.
Okay, so if you do want to see us when we watch the Scorch Trials and what's the last one?
The Death Cure.
The Death Cure. There's a couple of places you can be plugged in and ready to go for when that happens. If you go to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, you're in the prime location for when things drop. You'll see our feeds upload, you'll get notifications, and the only way you can do that is if you like, comment, and subscribe. Particularly subscribing. Get those little fingers going and push those buttons. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so in a couple of places. Jim_and_Ben for the old Instagrams, and Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on TikTok. So I texted you very early this week saying how excited I was about my next film pick.
You did.
Now, there are two reasons in life that I get excited. The first is genuine internal excitement. The second is, I'm about to do something weird to somebody else. Which one do you think this is?
The second one. It's definitely
Correct.
The second one.
Now, do you remember the clues I gave you?
Something about you said it's a sequel or something, and I'm like,
Yeah, I'm
what?
instantly breaking my rule of doing things in order.
But telling me it's a sequel, that's not a real clue, Ben. You know, there are so many sequels out there.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna pull up my clues just so we've got it.
I'm also really bad when you actually do these games.
It's impossible for you to get it from these clues. Impossible. Basically, I said it's a sequel of a series. It is a team-up movie where people of special skills get brought together to complete a goal. That was my set of clues that I gave you. Again, impossible to guess. But do you have a guess?
If I had to guess, I don't think this movie's bad enough to actually invoke the chaos mode you're talking about.
I don't think this movie is bad at all.
Well, in that case, maybe I do have it. Is it Now You See Me Too?
So incorrect. But the special skill or hobby angle is the correct way to go.
Yes. Okay.
So you're right. It's not like a bunch of thieves. Like it's magicians in Now You See Me. In my movie, it's incredibly talented street dancers. Step Up 3D.
Oh man.
It is the best Step Up movie, and it is so good.
So hang on. So this is not Step Up to the Streets.
No.
This is Step Up 3D.
Step Up to the Streets, Step Up 3D. There are 6 Step Up movies, my friend.
Man.
Step Up 3D is the best Step Up movie in my opinion. I have seen them all.
I can't watch it in 3D. I don't have that ability.
No. That's just the title of the film. It's just Step Up 3.
Guess
You will
we can't
see
watch
some
it
weird
at all.
artifacts based on how it was in 3D.
No. I don't want to do this.
I
Ben,
do.
I don't want
I
don't want to.
I'm inflicting a movie upon you.
How did you go from Akira Kurosawa to Step Up?
They're the
3D?
same film. We were talking about inspirations. A group of people come together.
Can I
to
just
achieve a
say
goal.
that when you do things like this, the YouTube algorithm has absolutely no idea what to do with our podcast.
It's good because I don't either. Hey guys, I will see you jumping and jiving next week as we step up 3D.
Okay. All right. This is going to be great. Bye.